Mark Allen, please introduce yourself to the audience. What do you do? Who are you?
My name is Mark Allen. I am a writer. I write novels. I write horror novels. I write unapologetically hardcore horror novels. That is what I do.
And what got you into not only writing, but writing horror specifically? Because I feel like either you're drawn to it immediately or, you're not. But you seem like an immediate person. So what is it about horror that makes you want to write about it?
To start out, everyone needs to understand I'm 63 years old. Okay. So I'm going to talk about my childhood, which was the 1960s. Okay. I grew up
We're
in
among friends. I'm a 1900s person as well. Not 1960s. I'm a 1991, but I get it. We are
you,
pre-internet people.
and all this time I thought you were barely 20. Whatever you're doing well. Okay. Whatever
Black
you're doing,
don't
keep
crack.
doing it.
Black don't crack. That's all I can say.
Well, there you go. Um, no, I grew up, my earliest memories are watching the old Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney Universal horror movies when I was a kid. Watching Creature from the Black Lagoon and stuff like that. See, where I grew up in a really, really small town in East Texas. And on our TV, which was a black and white, by the way, color TVs were significantly more expensive, and that was for rich people, right? And I grew up watching all these black and white horror movies. And when I got a little older, my older brother introduced me to Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and all the old Hammer films. And that's what I grew up with. And then into the 70s, the American independent film movement began, and a lot of that was horror in response to the collapse of the old studio system. And while the studios were running scared, trying to figure out a new business model, the independents were up and running, and they just ran over everything at that particular moment in history. Anyway, grew up, graduated high school, joined the military, um, saw real horror there. And I don't go into it much, but let's just say, yeah, shit got real. And did my time in the military. I was a Navy hospital corpsman. Eventually became a independent duty hospital corpsman, which meant they sent me into places that they would not send a doctor or a PA because they were very valuable. There was a lot of money invested in their recruiting and their training and all this other stuff. Relatively speaking, I was cheap labor. They could lose three IDCs for the same cost that it would cost them if they lost one doctor. So, and I know that sounds morbid, but that's just the reality of it. And
Right.
when you're in the military, you simply accept that. You know,
Right.
you are a cog in the machine, nothing more. And so, I did that, and I'd gone through some specialized combat training. I was a Fleet Marine Force warfare specialist, which meant I was one of those crazy guys who was out there in the thick of everything with my Marines. I had to do everything that they could do. I had to get trained right alongside them, in addition to keeping all my medical skills up, you know, because if one of these guys zigged when they should have zagged, it was my job to keep them alive at least long enough to get them medevaced out, you know. So
Right.
that's just the nature of what I did. And um, come around, fast forward to the last 6 or 7 years of my Navy career. Um, I had a marriage that was collapsing, and you go through a lot of soul searching when you go through something like that. And I realized I just wanted to be happy. Well, what made me happy? Writing, you know. And I was living in Southern California at the time, so it's like, well, I'll just I'll I'm going to learn how to write screenplays for motion pictures. I knew how to write a short story. I knew how to write a novella. I had done all of that as a kid. Um, so I bought some books, went to some seminars, started writing. And I eventually was able to get some movies made, landed an agent here and there through over the course of that. Wrote 3 movies that got produced. Now, these are not big budget studio films. These are films that went straight to DVD. They were definitely at the shallow end of the pool, okay?
Those are some of the best ones, though. I review a lot of indie movies, and let me tell you, you can do a lot with $5,000.
Well, I'm glad you said that because the very first film of mine that got produced, I produced it, I directed it, I edited it. Okay,
Was it
we
$5,000 too?
it was
Not okay.
nine
I was
thousand dollars.
close.
I worship at the altar of Roger Corman,
Yes.
and I did something that would make Roger Corman proud. I shot a 95-page screenplay in 9 days for $9,000. And not only was I able to cut it together and get some sweeten it with the music and the soundtrack and the sound and all that, uh, we actually got a distribution deal because this was back when video stores were still a thing,
Right.
right? And we actually got a distribution deal. We were all over North America. We were in several countries in what is now the European Union. Um, we were even in like Hong Kong and Indonesia and Russia and I think we were in like Cambodia or someplace like that. You know, it was a long time ago, but yeah. And I thought, okay, this is my business model. I'm going to write and direct my own micro budget films. And next time around, I was going to have a budget of around $100,000 because I wanted to be able to actually take a salary for myself and pay everybody else.
Right.
Because on this first movie, nobody got paid. There, it was all uh, what we call deferred pay, including me. I didn't take any money. Okay, but the 2008 came around, and the markets crashed. This is the beginning of the Great Recession, and the financiers that I had lined up for this second film all just went,
Mm.
you know, and suddenly I'm all by myself holding the bag, and I had already spent some money in good faith, money out of my own pocket that I was going to recoup when those checks actually hit my account, right? Because these were line items in the budget.
Mm.
And suddenly I'm facing a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And, you know, the economy was incredibly bad at the time. And um, eventually that movie did get made, but it didn't get made until 2011 and got released in 2013, and that was Early Grave, which is still out on DVD. I think it's still on Amazon Prime and on Tubi and some other places.
I'm gonna go watch it.
Okay, well, it's not high art by any means. I
It
was
doesn't matter. I'm gonna watch it.
truthfully, truthfully, I was disappointed with how it turned out. Uh, but see, I was just the screenwriter on that one. I didn't direct it. I got named as a producer because I gave them the script for $1 in addition to a producer credit and profit participation, which of course never happened.
Mhm.
But anyway, that got out there, and then in 2014, I got diagnosed with a stage 4 throat cancer,
Oh,
and everything had to be put on hold because the only thing that mattered was trying to stay alive. And I'm able to do that. It cost me dearly between the cancer, the surgeries, the radiation, because it was a head and neck cancer. So I'm getting my head blasted with radiation. And this is 5 days a week for 7 weeks. Okay. It's high doses of radiation. I mean, I glowed in the dark.
oh no.
But anyway, um, killed my cancer, damn near killed me. And so now I've got certain limitations and certain debilitations. I've got some chronic pain conditions from this, um, and I had to come to the realization that I was not physically capable of the rigors of the long days for 6 to 7 days a week for 6 to 8 months that it takes to go from script to shooting to editing, and all that. I just
Right.
didn't have it in me. There's just no gas in the tank for that.
Right. It's a lot of
So,
work.
yeah. And you're working 14, 16 hours a day, and every decision you make, and you're making 100 of them a day every day, every decision you make has to be the right one because all it takes is one mistake, and that movie that would have been a piece of art turns out being a piece of shit. And that is just the nature of this collaborative medium called film. And I started writing a screenplay about a vampire that lived in San Diego and didn't have a heart of gold, but he had an old fashioned moral compass. He knew right from wrong. And I started this as a screenplay. And when I was about 60 pages into the screenplay, and I realized that I was still in the first act, I knew I had a big problem. For those of you who don't know, most screenplays for most of the movies that you see only run about 90, maybe 100 pages. Now, Gladiator ran like 140, but that's an exception. Most of your 90, 95-minute movies, the screenplays only run about 95, 100 pages. And they're broken into 3 acts. The first act is at the very beginning. It's like the first 15 minutes. It only runs about 20 pages. After that, you're in the second act. That runs about 60 pages. And then the third act begins, and it only runs like another 20. So you wind up with about a 90 to 110 page screenplay. And that just wasn't working. And my wife looked at it and said, well, Mark, you're, after my divorce, I remarried. Um, she says, Mark, you're not writing a screenplay. You're writing a novel.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it.
Well, and that was like, that was the epiphany. And I went back and I started over from scratch, um, and started writing it as a Word document. And I kid you not, Celia, boom, the thing just took off like a shot. It practically wrote itself. And there were days when my fingers were flying because I was just trying to keep up
Right.
with what the characters in my head were telling me. If you can get into that right zone as a writer, Your characters will tell you the story for you, and all you have to do is pay attention and write down what they say. And those are the best days of writing. Those are the days that a writer lives for. And so I pursued that, and Nocturnal got released in 2017. And I kept trying to split my time between novels and screenplays. And the novel started gaining more and more traction, and the screen career was just going nowhere. And a third film finally got made. I had sold a script in 2015 for an incredibly low price, a price that ordinarily I would have turned down. But I was going through the cancer. I couldn't work my day job anymore.
Yeah.
My
Take
my
what you
my
can get.
state, yeah, the state benefits were starting to run out, and I was going to go to federal, which were going to be even lower than the state benefits. And bottom line is, I needed the money, so I said, yeah. So I sold the script in 2015, and over the years, I'd emailed the producer, and hey, any traction on this? Are you guys going to make this? And over time, I eventually just quit asking, and I moved on with my life. Out of the blue, in 2023, I get an email saying, Mark, we're going to make your movie. And I said, okay. So I read the script over the weekend. I took notes because I hadn't looked at it in like a decade. And I saw places where things should be tweaked. I mean, I had written the best script I could then, but I'm a better writer now than I was then,
Mm.
right? And so I had all these great ideas of how I was going to make the script better. And when I had a Zoom call with him, with the producer, he said, "Oh no, Mark, we just wanted you to know.
Mm.
We don't need any more writing services from you. We just wanted you to know. We've partnered with this other company called the Ninth House, and the Ninth House makes a lot of made-for-television films.
Hmm.
They do films for like Lifetime. They do films for the Hallmark Channel and stuff like that. And they're accustomed to working with really small budgets, right? And now we're talking about a much bigger budget than what I was talking about for a small budget for me.
Right.
But they're accustomed to working well under $1 million. I said, well, okay. So they went and shot their movie, and I went on with my writing career. And uh, they sent me a trailer for it, and I watched the trailer, and I swear to you, and I'm supposed to be a tough guy, right? I cried.
Oh.
I cried. The production value was so good. The actors in fucking incredible.
So it was a good cry.
Yes,
Okay. Oh, good.
because
Okay.
I I told my at the time and my 86-year-old mother, because I was in Texas on a visit at the time, and I told her, if I never sell another script, I can die a happy man. This will be the pinnacle of my screenwriting career because somebody finally got it right. Someone has read my script, saw what I'm really talking about, and they got it right. And when the movie finally came out, it came out in October of last year, 2024, uh, for free on Tubi. It's showing on Apple TV Plus. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's across several monetized YouTube channels. Yeah, you can see it for free, but you got to sit through commercials. Yeah, okay. Um, oh my God, Celia, if you're gonna watch something that I had something to do with, if you're gonna watch my work, something that I wrote, start with that one. It's called Restitution.
Restitution. Okay.
Yeah, four people in the entire movie, and about 70% of the movie, it's just two people. That's it.
That's got to be some good writing to make that work.
Well, I was dealing with some thematic elements that lent itself to this, where I took the it's a female driven revenge thriller, but I took it to such an extreme that it becomes horrific. And what I'm really doing is I'm asking the question is, what is the nature of evil? Is evil born in us? Like, say, a true textbook psychopath, a sociopath, where their limbic system is different, their amygdala in their hindbrain is different. All this stuff is different in their heads. Even their brainwave patterns are different from the majority of us, okay? And they don't have any, here's the thing, they don't have any say in it. This
Right.
is how they were formed in utero. So it truly is something they're born with. So the question is evil born, or can it be chosen? Can we make a conscious choice to choose violence upon the innocent, violence upon the weak, or simply violence against other people in general? You know, is it nurture or nature?
Right. I was going to
You
say
know,
it's that whole nature versus nurture question.
right? And that's what the film is really about. And I do not answer that question. I ask the question. I give arguments from each side, but it's not my job to tell people what to think. I don't want to tell people what to think. That is not my job as a writer. All my job as a writer is to simply, number one, entertain people, and secondary to that, to get them to think, to maybe ask that question themselves, and let them stew on it a bit, let them think about it. But it's not my place to tell others what to think. Um, I just I know a lot of people in the arts do that, and if that's what they want to do, fine. They have that choice. My choice is to not do that. I'm just it just it's not my place to do that.
Right. We're going to talk about some of those themes in your story a little bit later, but let me circle
Sure.
back to writing Nocturnal. You were saying how the words just they just came all at once. It just was like butter, a knife through butter. Do you
There
have
were days like that. Yeah.
yeah, do you have a certain like writing style? Like, for example, was it all going in sequence, like from beginning to end, or did you have bits and pieces of this storyline and this storyline, and then you just managed to connect them all together? Is that how you work, or do you have
On
a mix of different writing styles?
I started out as a pantster, meaning I'd write by the seat of my pants. I have started to plot loosely, mainly for continuity from one novel to the next. So I plot loosely. I'll get three or four major plot points or set pieces that I want to have, but I don't, and I do this on purpose. I don't write too much detail about how I get from one point to another. It's like stringing lights.
Mhm.
Each light is a plot point, and that cord going from one light to the next to the next to the next, that's the beauty. That's the fun. That's the art. That's that creative spark. Okay, how do I get to this next place? You know, and that's where you really do rely on the characters to tell you how you get there. And if you listen closely and if you're extremely lucky, they'll tell you. I call myself, everyone's heard of a method actor, right? I'm a method writer. I have to feel what my characters feel. I have to believe what they say and do within the fantastical elements of a fictitious story, right? But I have to believe. And what they do has to remain within their character. Because you want to pull a reader out of your story, you want to destroy that willing suspension of disbelief. Have a character say or do something that goes completely against what you have established for that character.
Right. Right.
You lose your audience about that fast. So I keep notes about continuity, and that's about it. The rest of it, I still want that creative spark. I want to be as surprised as everybody else. But that's why my writing sessions sometimes will only last 3 or 4 hours, because that's all I can take because of some really powerful, really deep emotions, some dark psychological stuff. And I draw on my own life experiences. I will draw on anything and everything, anything that I have ever experienced in my life, anyone that I have ever met, anything is fair game. I will draw on it in order to tell the story I need to tell. So, but yeah, a lot of times, I might get only, 12 to 1,500 words in a 3 or 4 hour period. I'm always shooting for 2,000 a day. That's what I want. I don't always get there. But some days are better than others. There are some days where I'm physically incapable of writing. It all goes back to that uh, uh, life after cancer
Yeah.
is no picnic. But yeah, I plot a little bit, but I leave a lot of room for interpretation.
Now, Alpha Male, the book that
Ah,
we're here to talk about. So, Alpha Male is about werewolves. There's a werewolf on the
mm-hmm,
cover. There are a million types of horror subgenres,
mm-hmm,
werewolves being one of them, and just supernatural beings in general.
yeah.
What drew you to write about werewolves? Do you just like werewolves? Or did
That's
something lead you there? An idea,
well,
perhaps.
well, ever since I first saw Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman, werewolves have always fascinated me more than any other supernatural creature. And I wanted to tell a story that had not been told. And this is the thing about how I found my niche within the horror community. As a writer, I looked for the stories that were not being told. I looked for the stories for the things that were not being said. I looked for the places where there was silence. I tell those stories. I tell those words. I fill that silence. There's all kinds of stories out there: werewolves, vampires, mummies, whatever. And I still do it now. I read story after story after story after story where that creature is evil. It is the threat to normalcy. It is the other, the outsider. It's that cardboard cutout caricature to represent evil, right? And I said, well, what if we tell their story? Let's bring them to the center. Let's bring them front and center. Let's keep them dangerous creatures, you know, but let's give them a bit of a deeper personality. Let's give them some strengths and weaknesses. Let's curse them with a moral compass. And then let's drop them into situations where they have to make moral decisions. They have to make decisions that will be in keeping with their morality, which is to be good men. Uh, they're not interested in being nice guys. They want to be good men.
But
And
if
there's a
you
huge
ask,
difference between those two things.
yes, but if you ask Logan Olivier, he's not man. He's beast.
Yeah, even when he is in werewolf form, he is the beast. Uh, Logan lives and breathes in darkness. He's not interested in the detente that in alpha male exists between werewolves and humans. For those of you who don't know, Alpha Male is the second book in a trilogy of werewolf novels that I'm writing. The first one being Blood Red Moon. Logan lives and breathes in the dark. He is drunk on his own power and his own perception of superiority over humans. He feels that he is inherently superior to them simply because of what he is. He also thinks that they are inherently inferior because of what they are. Gee, what does that sound like?
I know. What does that sound like?
Yeah, could it be that I kind of pulled that from the real world?
There is so many parallels that you could draw between alpha male and the real world. So many.
Yeah, 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 and that's on purpose. I do my best to, at least publicly, I don't talk my politics, I don't talk my religious beliefs, and I do not talk about my sex life. Not in public. I don't. That kind of goes into my writing. I do not want my own personal beliefs to filter in, because then it starts getting to that point where I'm telling other people what to think. And I refuse to do that. So what I did in Alpha Male is you've got two competing philosophies, one on one side, one on the other. And I simply give you arguments and counter arguments to each. And then it's up to the reader to decide, really who's right and who's wrong. It's not my place to tell them that. So yeah, I'm dealing with some pretty complex thematic elements in the subtext, and I live and breathe for the subtext. I really do. And you've read my book, so you know what I'm talking about. See, I'm going to paraphrase the late great film director George Romero. Okay, I don't write horror stories. I write stories with horrific elements in them so I can talk to you about other things that are vastly more important.
Yes.
My vampires, my werewolves, I'm not really talking about vampires and werewolves. That's all the window dressing to draw you into the story. Once I get you in the story, I'm trying to talk to you about other stuff. Yeah.
So, main character, Caleb Jacobson,
Yeah.
the one true global alpha. He has
Yeah.
yes, he has this reluctance to actually be that because he is a lone wolf at heart. But through the story, we see him come to fully accept his role in all of this,
Yes.
almost excitedly by the end, knowing all the possibilities of what good change he could bring, not only to werewolf kind, but the world all over. How did you develop that arc with Caleb? And not only his arc, but there are several characters that have kind of like mini arcs. Marla has a mini arc. Jacques has a
Hmm.
mini arc. How do you think of these arcs that these people are going to have and decide who's going to do what while writing your story?
I always keep in mind the larger overarching story that I'm telling throughout the three novels. And the first novel is like the first act of a screenplay. I write novels in three acts. And each individual novel in this trilogy is going to be a first, a second, and eventually a third act. So I've got arcs that I'm carrying from the first book all the way across to the third. What you see in Alpha Male is actually a Blood Red Moon set up Alpha Male. The events of Alpha Male and the character arcs therein set up the third novel, which coincidentally I'm going to start writing probably this weekend. So I'm keeping all of that in mind because I have to have continuity across all three novels because I'm not telling three different stories. I'm
Right.
telling one large story in three different episodes, you know. So some of the characters uh, that are just kind of slightly in the second book are going to wind up being very important in the third. I'm developing them so that they have a character arc. So yeah, that's what I do.
I will say that at first I didn't realize that this was a second book in a trilogy. I kind of got little glimpses of that throughout the story, talking about how how Caleb got to be the global alpha. Um,
Hmm.
but I will say I think you did a fabulous job at not there was just enough there where it's almost as if I had read the first one, so I didn't need to see the first movie to understand the second. So I'm glad that
Yeah,
that was a thing. And I'm excited knowing
I
now
worked
that
very
there are
hard.
these arcs that I'm going to see continue on into the third book.
Yeah, and I thank you for that compliment because I worked very hard um, to give just enough exposition and backstory back to the first novel so that if someone, such as yourself, picked up Alpha Male and did not know that it was the second in a trilogy, you could read it and enjoy it for the story that it is
Yes.
without being completely lost as to who these people were, what their relationships were, and all that type of thing. That was very important to me.
Yes, and I'll also add to that early on in Alpha Male, I was thinking of, okay, I think I know where this story is going. They're gonna try to capture Marla, and there's gonna be this whole thing. And it sort of went that way, but it didn't because that had happened before. So when I realized that, oh, that already happened, it almost opened up a whole new like, oh wow, okay, this isn't going where I thought it was going. So it was exciting to keep reading and find out what's gonna happen.
I take that as high praise. Uh, Marla has Marla has grown on me uh, from the first book. In the first book, she she really is through no fault of her own. Okay, she really does sort of become a damsel in distress, and the stakes are the the lives or deaths of about half the human race. So we're talking about 4 billion people.
Hmm.
And for the survivors, hell would be a picnic for what the werewolves had in store for them.
Right.
And and Caleb just says, "We'll just see about that." And the first book is really a story about a man who just wants to be left alone,
Right.
and how dangerous a man who wants to be left alone, or a woman for that matter. It just happened to be a male in this
Yeah.
story. Anybody who just wants to be left alone, just how dangerous they can be when you start poking the bear and you don't stop.
Hmm.
You know, he he was capable of absolutely horrendous violence, and he knew it, and that's why he didn't want to do it. And it's the same in alpha male. He is fully aware of what he can do. He knows, and he is always very careful about when, how, and how much of that beast he truly releases, because he could do carnage on a scale that most people, real people, can't even imagine
Right.
of what he can do. And that's what you find, with combat vets, uh, especially guys who were infantry or were special forces or something like that. They'll be the quiet guys in the room, the loudest guys in the room. Nah, that's not it. Quiet guys in the room, the ones that just kind of sit back and watch, they're the ones you have to worry about.
Right.
And those guys, they just, after all the stuff they've been through, they just want their peace and they want to be left alone. And the last thing you want to do is give them a reason to show you what they can do. And that's Caleb. That is Caleb. Although, and I don't want to give anything away, but there is a point, a little more than halfway through the book, maybe about 2/3 of the way. There is a point where, after a major plot point in the book and a major action set piece has happened, um, Caleb goes absolutely dark, and you see just how dark and how savage he can go,
Right.
because it scares the people around him, even though he's not leashing out at them. Um, it scares the people around him. It scares the people closest to him. They see it and they recognize it for what it is, and they're just kind of like, "Oh shit," you know. Fuck. There are depths to this guy we have not seen. And I did that on purpose, because again, it's all part of that character arc
Hmm.
that I want to put on him. So yeah, you do start to catch a glimpse of it, um, and you catch a glimpse of it at the end.
That's just a
Um,
glimpse at the end.
yeah, that's just a glimpse at the
Oh
end.
my goodness.
Yeah, yeah,
Audience out there, read the book and realize that, wow, that's a lot, but that's only a glimpse. Oh my goodness.
that's just a glimpse of how dark he can go. And I put little hints in there from the very beginning, uh, that I wanted to show people how his arc in this second book is. You know, Um, and I tried to be direct yet subtle at the same time because I don't want to beat people over the head with it, you
Right.
know. But in the beginning, he's so uncomfortable being in a position of leadership because he doesn't want it, you know. Because again, he just wants to be left alone.
Right.
Unfortunately, life has other plans, and when they call him sire, he hates that. For the love of God, will you quit calling me sire? You know. And then they start calling him sir, and he's uncomfortable with that. But eventually, over the course of the book, they're still saying yes, sir, no, sir, sir, may I speak with you? And if you notice, over time, he becomes no longer uncomfortable with
Right.
that deference. He starts to get used to it until at the end of the book, when he at the very end, when he is uh, handing out orders. I don't want to say barking orders, but when he's handing out orders about, hey, LeBlanc, I need you to go do this. Jack, I need you to do this. You two, I need you to do this. Um, he's firing this stuff off just rapid fire. You, I need you to do this. You do this. You do this. He is full in that leadership mode,
Yes.
you know. And I hope you picked up on this. He uses the word fetch.
Yes.
And the two people that he's giving these orders to, they kind of pause and their eyes widen and they look at him and they say, Sire? And his eyes go dark and they start swirling amber, and his skin starts to darken. And through his fangs, he says, You heard me.
Hmm.
And of course, Marla is there and she touches his leg to calm him down. And because much like wolves, werewolves live in the moment.
Yes.
So they can be literally at your throat 1 second. The next second, they can be licking your hand. And to them, this is normal existence. And she touches his leg, to calm him down. And she says, "You have your orders," or something to that effect.
Right.
And then I said, and then they left, and they obeyed. And that word was chosen very, very specifically for that sentence. It's supposed to have both an emotional and a psychological impact on the reader because I'm showing the reader something, again, without beating them on the head with it.
Right.
The verbiage, the use of language in these novels, I don't choose my words capriciously or carelessly. They are all chosen to either grab you by the brain, grab you by the throat, grab you by the gut, or grab you by a certain part of the anatomy
The
south of your belt
groin.
buckle. You know, it. I'm going for that emotion. I'm trying to create an emotional reaction in the reader.
Now, I'm going to tell you some of my favorite scenes and favorite
Okay.
characters, and then you can share with me yours. Okay?
Okay. All
So,
right.
I can say that I think my favorite part of Alpha Male was Caleb and LeBlanc and his crew going to the nightlife club It was just kind of a nice like, okay, things are building up now, but let's take some steam off a little bit and see what we can do. And I thought it was kind of funny. I think my favorite character is Sam the Ghoul. He just seemed the doorman. He just seemed kind of
Mhm.
fun, especially when they notice his smell and they're like, what are you? Because you're not human, but you reek. He's like, oh, I'm a ghoul. That's just how I am.
Yeah,
I really
yeah,
liked him. He was comedic relief. But I also really liked Jack Crawford. He just seemed like a
yeah.
cool dude, someone you can trust, and someone who, even if he wasn't a werewolf, he still would have that kind of sixth sense about people and situations. And
Very much so.
he was a cool dude.
Jack Crawford. I grew up knowing 100 Jack Crawfords. They're good men. They're pleasant. They're polite. They'll be respectful to you,
Yes.
but they're not going to take any shit off of you.
Right, right.
And don't try to piss down their back and tell them that it's raining. Um, in the book, I talk about Tyler, Texas, and Art, Texas, and all that. You see, I grew up in Jacksonville, Texas, which is 30 miles due south from Tyler. My mother's side of the family were all born and raised in Art.
Oh, okay.
Okay, my maternal grandparents had their farm in Art, Texas, and all five of their children, including my mother, were born in that farmhouse that they had. And so that is a tribute to my family by having part of the story take place in East Texas, because that, other than me, that's where all my people still are. You know, my mother, my siblings, my cousins, you know, all that kind of stuff. They're all, the few aunts and uncles that I still have left. They all live in Texas, and most of them live in East Texas. You know, they that's just them. Me, I was the one with the wanderlust. I live in northwestern Washington State. You know, just it's just how my life turned out.
So let's move on to talk about werewolves now and werewolf
Okay.
lore. There are
Okay.
there are lots of different ideas about how werewolves come to be, what they look like, how you can kill them if you needed to.
Mhm.
How did you take all these bits and pieces of different lore and form your own type of werewolf?
Full moons and silver bullets went out the window right away. I wanted them to be able to change any time of the day or night, any time of the month. In the first book, I do a lot of exposition on this. Um, they have been infected with a virus that mutates their DNA. Now, and if you know anything about the technology behind uh, the mRNA vaccines and stuff like that, guess what? That's how they work. They actually alter your DNA so that you become immune to whatever they're trying to uh, make you immune to. They're altering your DNA just very, very slightly so that you will not be susceptible or as susceptible to whatever disease that they're trying to immunize you against. So I took that medical fact and took my own medical background and knowledge, and then my own imagination, my sick, twisted imagination. And I said, okay, I will double the DNA in each cell from 22 chromosomal pairs to 44. Now, in real life, we know that's impossible. If you tried to do that, the subject would die. But we're talking about werewolves here,
Right.
okay? Werewolves don't exist, so I can do whatever the heck I want.
Yes.
And so this virus has mutated their DNA. And by having half human, half wolf, that allows them to have the long muzzles and the long ears and the flat heads while still being able to walk upright. You know, uh, I decided for just for my purposes, they did not have tails. Um, and the one thing that I get complimented on time and time again, and I just thought it was a cool thing to do. I didn't know it was going to become a big deal. Is even when they change into werewolf form, they still have the cognition and the logic and the awareness, the consciousness of a human being.
Right.
What the difference is that, you know, when they're in human form, they still have certain inhibitions. There's certain lines they won't cross and all that. When they change, when they make the change, um, everything's instinctual. It's that those inhibitions fall by the wayside. There's no line. It's all about food, drink, warmth, shelter, sex, mating, you know. And I just thought that was cool, but I actually have been complimented on that by more than one person that that was the thing that stood out the most uh, in the novels is that they can still think,
Right.
you know.
And I think that is well worth being complimented on because you're right. They can still think it's almost as if they're just like bulked up humans almost. Just way more dangerous, way more hairy.
Yeah,
Okay, so you said this works like a virus that alters your DNA, right?
right,
Where
right.
where did the first werewolf come from? Did they catch a virus? And at what point? Because there's a section in this book where we talk about um pretty much it's the Harry Potter type, like, okay, were you born magic or did you become magic? Are you a mudblood
Uh,
or a half werewolf? At what point do you and your bloodline become fully werewolf as opposed to, well, obviously, if you're bitten, then it's right there. But
I brought up that question a little bit in Alpha Male because it's actually going to become a thing in the next book.
okay.
In the first book, I never really say where the first werewolf came from. Um, what I what I do say, and it was my villain who had a nice monologue. I mean, I would have made Shakespeare proud. I gave this guy a monologue like you wouldn't believe. And but he talks about how since before time began, before recorded history, um, werewolves had developed in the shadow of man, and that there have always been werewolves, always, and that yeah, you can be infected. And I bring this up in the second book.
Hmm.
You can be infected, but if two werewolves sire an offspring, if they're both werewolves, there's like, and this is basic Mendelian
Yes.
genetics. This is
It's the
this is
Punnett square,
biology.
the big
Yeah, it's
capital,
yeah,
lowercase.
yeah. It's biology 101. You know, chances are like 75% chance they're going to have a child that will be born a werewolf, and then others are made. by being bitten. So yeah, they can breed and have werewolf children. And that's one of the things that I tried to really make a, a contrast from my vampire novels, because I've written two vampire novels. Um, my vampires don't have sex because they're dead,
Right.
right? And they don't have a blood flow.
Which you
So,
kind of need.
which you kind of need, and not only for the males but for females as well.
Yes.
Female sexual response is directly related to increased blood flow. So anyway, in that book, in my vampire novels, my nocturnal novels, they don't have sex, and it's really not a problem. They don't sit around thinking, God, I wish I could still have sex.
Yeah.
It's just simply not on their no longer on their radar anymore. Uh, my werewolves, they're randy bastards, man. They're they're I mean they'll scrog at the drop of a hat. They're horny, man. They
They're
are
not even warm blooded, they're hot blooded.
very much so, very much so. The only reason there's not more sex between Caleb and Marla is because of all the crap that I keep throwing at them.
Right.
You know, I
They don't have
mean,
time. They have to save the world. They don't have time for that.
exactly, exactly. I mean, they get a little bit of time together when they're in at that safe house in Switzerland,
Yeah.
and and that's it. I mean, I just could not find anywhere else in the book where I could give them more quiet time, intimate time together. There was just no place to put it and make it believable.
Right.
That's always the key. You got to make it believable. The reader has to go, yeah, yeah, I'll buy that. They're the one thing that the books do have in common, both my vampire and my werewolf novels, is that they are brutally violent and they are graphically accurate. I had someone one day accuse me of writing extreme violence,
Mm.
and before I could even answer, one of my uh, fellow writers up here in the Northwest, who was sitting right next to me at the time, she turned and she said, "No, he writes elevated horror." And I had to think about that for a minute because I wasn't quite sure. But then I realized what elevated anything means is we're talking about subtext, we're talking about themes, we're talking about all the stuff that's running under the surface, right,
Right.
beneath the window dressing. And I thought that was a marvelous compliment. But what I told this lady who said that I write extreme violence is, I said, no, I write medically accurate violence.
Right. Right. I didn't find it too graphic at all. I some of the stuff that I've seen is extreme violence, but this was not too much at all, I don't think. It could have been way more. Now, I'm not saying it should
Yeah.
have been. This was just enough. It was a perfect amount to get the point across. But yeah, I wouldn't consider that like extremely graphic.
No. Um, what I try to do, I don't write splatter gore.
Yeah.
Uh, Nothing against the people who do. In fact, I have marvelous colleagues that I respect immensely who write extreme horror and splatter gore and splatter punk and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And more power to them. Man, let them go. It's just not what I want to do.
Yeah.
You know, I want my stories to be story. Oh my God, story. Oh my God, story. Oh my God. And then the story's done. You know, that's what I'm trying to do. And I try to do that in all of my stories. The violence, the sex, the nudity, whatever it is, it must serve the story. If it does not serve the story, then it becomes gratuitous. And the first rule of editing is cut out the gratuitous.
Yes.
So, I'm always trying to strike that balance to give the horror fans what they want, what they expect. I'm trying to give the Mark Allen fans a book that is true to my nature and my voice. I sound so pretentious. But, the way I write, I mean, when people pick up a Mark Allen novel, they should be able to look at that cover and go, yep, that's a Mark Allen novel.
Right.
And then they turn the page and the first few pages they read, they should be able to go, yep, this is a Mark Allen novel. It's like if you watch an Alfred Hitchcock film. Within just the first few frames, within the first minute, you're watching a Hitchcock movie.
Right.
No one else could do this but Hitchcock. It's the same thing with James Cameron. You're watching a James Cameron film. It's the same with wonderful authors. When I read H.G. Wells, he writes in a very specific way. Mary Shelley, no one could have written Frankenstein but Mary Shelley.
Right.
Bram Stoker, as long as he wasn't, three-quarters of the way into his scotch, the man could write, you know. Stephen King, you open up a Stephen King novel, you're reading a Stephen King novel. Same with Clive Barker, same, just I could go on and on and on naming names. Lee Child, who writes the Jack Reacher novels. I've read like 25 of those, and my writing style is actually a very direct descendant of Lee Child's writing styles in those novels. Uh, I can't say no. I didn't. I'm not influenced by him. I ripped him off completely. Um, using using sentence fragments instead of complete sentences.
Mm-hmm.
Having one word sentences. Having one sentence paragraphs. Having one word paragraphs. Having you write space, and then double space, one word or one line, double space, and then back into the story. I took all of that from him, man. I did. I really did. I, I still, like I tell you, everything is fair game. As long as I'm not plagiarizing someone,
Right.
everything else is fair game. And in my novels, when I do that, when I have paragraph, double space, one line, double space, paragraph, whatever is in that double space, I do that because the human eye will stop at the end of that last sentence. And then as it drops down that double space, that little bit of white on the page, you take a pause. You actually kind of take a breath, and then boom, I hit you with something that I really, really, really want you to pay attention to. And then another breath, and then boom, I'm right back into the story. That's as close as I come to hitting people on the head. That's the closest that I come to doing that.
I have to admit I do a similar thing with writing my reviews. Um I it for me M dashes and italics. M dashes and italics. You're gonna know which words I'm trying to to shout
Yeah,
out at you. Which words are the most important in this whole thing.
yeah. That is something that I used in my vampire series. My two vampire novels are set in San Diego, in California, because I lived there for 35 years, so I know the whole city intimately, and the city is a character in those two novels. Now, at the end of the second novel, my vampire decides that it's time to leave San Diego, and he decides that it's been decades since he's visited the Pacific Northwest, and that, oh yeah, he has an old friend that he thinks is still up there. Um, and he's like, of course, he's not a vampire, or he is not a vampire. My vampire does not use contractions.
Mhm.
He is not a vampire, but he is not without fearsome powers of his own.
I was gonna say, is this the same nightlife owner? Okay, okay.
Yes, yes. He has retired from his job as a stockbroker, because he was a stockbroker working in the Asian markets,
Hmm.
because he could sit in his apartment in San Diego with a headset and a laptop, and he could work the Asian markets at night, because when it's night in California, it's daytime there.
Yeah.
So that's how he worked. He didn't do it because he needed the money. He did it to keep busy. And in when he comes up here to my neck of the woods now, yeah, he bought a warehouse, had it converted into a nightclub, and Eddie Marks, the vampire, is the same guy that's in my first two novels, and he has moved up here. And oh yeah, he's friends with Caleb. They've known each other for decades.
Yes.
You know, so yeah, it's the same guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we are winding down in the questions here, just a few last ones, okay?
Okay.
So, looking ahead, um,
Mm-hmm.
we already know that alpha male is part of this whole huge world. It's not just the alpha male book, it's this whole world. Can you
Right.
tell us anything we might expect from Caleb and Marla in the third book? Can you give us any, they don't have to be spoilers per se,
Well,
but what might we look forward to? Or any characters we might meet? Are we going to see more of the supernatural world and not just werewolves?
in the third novel, in this first novel, or in Alpha Male, uh, Marla really starts to come into her own. Um, we see how even her mind, her thought processes change as she goes through the turning, right? And we see how the mutated DNA has not only changed her body, it has changed her mind and her psyche and her thought processes. And this is all part of it. And I didn't really go into it in the first novel. I wanted to go into it in this one, and I wanted to go into it with her, because those new thought processes are going to play a really key factor in the third book. Marla is really going to come into her own in the third book, and she will completely inhabit being the alpha female to Caleb's alpha male. They will become truly an alpha pair where they rule together.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, um, Tim, the young the young waif
Yes.
that they took in. Caleb has this habit of taking in strays,
Oh.
right? Uh, Tim is going to grow into full maturation. Um, David LeBlanc will be back.
Good.
Um, Jack Crawford will be back.
Good. I'm glad.
Uh, Eddie Marks will be back, and he's going to have a bigger role in what comes next.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, that's going to be happening, and um, things from the first book, from Blood Red Moon, are going to come back around full circle into this third novel, which I don't know if this is the title that's going to be, but right now I'm calling it Caleb's Reign.
Okay.
Reign being spelled Reign. Okay, his reign as Alpha. So yeah, a lot of returning characters. Uh, some characters are gonna have more of their own arc. Some are gonna kind of fade back. Um, but yeah, I've got very specific ideas of what I want to do and how I want to do it. And Marla will continue to be that calming force. But don't mistake that for weakness. This woman has a spine made out of titanium.
Oh
Make no
yeah.
mistake about it.
Oh yeah, she
Make,
does. But I
she
saw
does.
it full and well. I won't say which part in Alpha Male, but I saw it full and well in Alpha.
Yeah, yeah. And I wanted Alpha Male to be as much her story as it was his, and it's going to be the same thing in the third novel. It's as much her story as it is his, because they are truly working together. They are a united front. You know, there's no, at least publicly, there's no bickering. There's no back and forth. There's no, oh, he says one thing, she says another. No. That stuff happens behind closed doors. You know, which that's what leadership, true leadership, is all about.
Right.
And very much Alpha Male is a meditation on leadership. And what is the difference between a leader and a boss?
Right.
Because Logan is a boss, and he very much acts like one.
Yes.
Caleb is a leader. Their thought processes are not the same, you know. And I don't want to tell much more because I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read the book yet. But yeah, it's going to continue on in the third book. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm excited to read the third book. And I want to request you put me in the book, even if you kill me, even if I'm in there for one page. You can kill me. It's okay.
I'll
So,
see what I can do.
all right. You don't have to, but if you want to.
Like I
So,
said, I'll see what I can do.
final question.
Okay.
If Alpha Male became a movie, who
Mm-hmm.
would play Caleb and who would play Logan and who would you play?
God, I hadn't really thought of this. Man, you just threw a curveball over the
Take
plate.
take your time.
Um, Caleb, dark hair, dark eyes, beard, reluctant hero. The A-lister who embodies that quality um, would be Keanu Reeves.
Okay.
He doesn't have that quite that physique though. Caleb is, he's built like a shit brick house.
Yeah.
He looks like a goddamn Greek statue. You know, and see, here's the thing: it's not vanity. All the werewolves are like this. It's part of
Right.
their metabolism. They burn, they burn every calorie they eat.
It
You know,
must be
even
nice.
even yeah, I wish.
Yeah.
Even Marla gained weight, but she lost body fat, but she gained muscle because by the time she was done with her turning, she had the shoulders like they had cannonballs under the skin. She had a pronounced bicep. She had the medial cleft in her chest.
Yeah.
She had 6 pack abs, which she had never had before. Um, and she had more muscle on her thighs, which is all part of it. And her calves were bigger. In fact, I think at one point she looks at them and she's enjoying this to no end, and she does something about, damn, look at those gams. you know, she's loving it. Um, who could play her? Goodness, right age, right ethnicity. Um, I think Ava Longoria. You
Yeah,
know,
actually, that would
yeah,
work.
Ava Longoria could pull that off. There's a couple of other Hispanic actresses that could pull it off too, because any of you hadn't read the book, Marla, her last name is Moreno. She's half Hispanic and half white. And but yeah, Ava Longoria could would be a good thing for that. As for who would play Logan, that's where you want to get the best actor you can, because the villains are always the centerpiece to these stories. Your
Yes.
hero is only as good as their villain. Um,
And it has to be someone believable as a villain, because if you get someone known for being like this really nice person,
mhm.
I don't know if I'm not into it.
I'll tell you, someone who's brilliant at playing villains. Jason Isaacs. You know, Jason Isaacs could play. He could pull off Logan. You know, now I don't know if he would want to play a character like that, because Jason Isaacs is of Jewish descent, and as we know from the novel, um, you know, Logan made some different choices
Different is
over
a
the.
good word for that.
Yeah, he made some different choices, but even at that, the reason I put that in was to give more backstory to that character, and to show him that his propensity for evil was nothing new. Okay,
Right,
this is
right.
this is just who this man is. He's he's just got this. You don't necessarily have to know where it came from either. All you have to know is that he's been like this all his life.
Yeah.
He's always had this propensity to turn to darkness and to brutality and to sadism and to evil. He's always been this way. And all what the only reason I tell that backstory to him is because I want the reader to go, someone's got to stop this fucker,
Right.
man. And I want people to be reading, going, oh my god, Caleb ripped this motherfucker to shreds.
Right. That
You
was
know,
me reading this.
that is what. And even when I give the backstory on Jacques, his lieutenant, um, you find out they haven't always agreed on everything. They've been friends for a long time, but they haven't always agreed on everything. And when it came to that time in World War II that I write about, they made vastly different decisions on how they were going to deal with the world events of that time. And yet at some point along the line, Jacques forgave him, you know? And for me, that was what made Jacques irredeemable, you know, is that he knew full well
Yeah.
the choices that Logan had made during the war and who he had backed and all that. But somewhere along the line, Jacques just says, "War's over, man. We were friends before. You want to be friends again? Okay,
Right.
let's see what we can do about repairing this relationship." And let's face it, there are just certain things that you don't forgive.
Right.
There are certain things you don't forget. Even if you forgive them, you don't forget them, right?
Right.
And um, so, yeah, even Jacques was irredeemable, and ultimately, in the end, what we find out is Jacques a coward. You know,
Yep.
that's what we find out because when it comes his time, um, he does not face things bravely. You know, I wanted everyone to understand that for all the stuff he had done, he was not a brave man. You know, he was not. He was not a good guy. He was not a good man. He was irredeemable. He was just as irredeemable as Logan was.
Right.
And I want people to cheer at the end of the book when they find out what happens to these two characters. You know,
I think
people are going, yes.
I think you see sort of a similar thing with Anders and Alicia. When Alicia finds out what Anders was doing in World War II as well.
Yes.
And it really speaks to the cracks that you can see all throughout Logan's rebellion pack that, this thing
Right.
is riddled with cracks. It's not right
Yeah.
on every front.
Well, yeah. I mean, the werewolves are just like people. The
Yep.
werewolves are not monolithic. They're not all of one mind. They have their own ideas about things, just like people do. And that's the thing about these monsters that I create. They're us.
Yep.
I I take different facets of human nature. In fact, in some cases, I take different factors of my own nature, both good and bad, and infuse it into some of these characters because I want the reader to be able to identify and to relate with both the hero and the villain. That is what creates art, and it's what gives the reader an emotionally satisfying experience.
Right.
If your audience cannot relate to the characters, then the story is going to leave them flat. And at that point, you have failed as a writer.
Yes.
The one cardinal sin is to fail to elicit an emotional response. You know, whether it's a good response or a bad response, they're both perfectly legitimate. But at least some response. You know, it's like I don't mind getting like fives on uh, Amazon. You know, when people rate my books. I mean, fives are great; they're a nice ego stroke. But even when I get the ones, I'm okay with it. It doesn't bother me, and I'll tell you why. It means two things. Number one, they didn't get the book; they didn't understand what I was talking about. Uh, Second thing, at least I elicited an emotional response.
Right.
It was not the one I was going for, but at least it was something. You know what makes me cringe? I mean, I just go, ugh, is when I get a three because it's right there in the middle. It's not
Uh,
great. It's not terrible. It's right there in the middle. That's middling. I don't want to be middling in anything I do in my life.
yeah.
You know. Um, so yeah, that always bothers me. But no, as long as I can elicit an emotional response from my reader, I have done my job.
So you never said who you would be in this alpha male movie. Would you even be a werewolf? You don't have to pick a character that was actually in the book. You could be
Mhm.
just another being in this world.
Well, I know, and being a guy who writes this kind of stuff, I have thought about that. Um, I would, within the supernatural world that I'm creating in these two series of books, I would much rather be a werewolf than a vampire. And the reason is this: when vampires get to dawn, they actually die.
Yeah.
They shrivel up, they mummify, they desiccate, and it hurts. It's painful. When they wake up at night, they reanimate, and it's like being born again or something.
Mhm.
And it's painful. It hurts, and they live their lives knowing that they only have a few hours before they have to go through that pain again,
Even if they don't touch the sun?
even if they don't touch the sun.
Oh, I don't like that.
And don't get me started on what happens to them when the sun, if they touch the sun. Let's just say in my vampire series, he's closer to 30 days of night
Oh,
than he is twilight. He does not sparkle in the sun, and
good.
when he does feed, he will only hunt criminals. And let's just say he's a messy eater. Okay, he's a messy eater.
I love me a messy vampire.
Then I recommend you read Nocturnal and Just Before Dawn because he is a messy eater, and he does not cuss, and he does not use contractions ordinarily. If he if he ever cusses or uses a contraction, it's because he's on the verge of absolutely losing his temper and falling into that abyss, you know. So, yeah, when the he only does it once in the first book and he only does it once in the second. And it's at that point where, it's like the old Popeye cartoon. That's all I can stands. I can't stands no more. Well, that's kind of him. When he gets pushed to that point, oh man, you you don't want to be in this vampire's path. Mm-mm. No, 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 no. Mm-mm. But as far as what would I be a werewolf? Yeah, I'd rather be that. Yeah, between the two, I'd much rather be that. And I certainly don't want to be a ghoul either.
Oh yeah, I
So
don't think anyone wants to be a ghoul really. I love Sam. Sam's great, but I don't want to be a ghoul.
yeah, yeah. The way nightlife is set up, and I'm going to delve into this more in future novels, because I do plan to write uh, another vampire novel a few years down the road. I've got a couple of other things I want to do first, but nightlife, I'm going to pattern it after Rick's Cafe in Casablanca,
Okay.
where for those of you who have never seen the movie Casablanca, rent it, buy the DVD,
Yes.
whatever you have to do, see this movie, okay? But, in Casablanca, it was neutral territory. You could have the Nazis because it takes place during World War II, folks. You could have the Nazis at one table, you'll have the French at another table, you'll have the British at another table, but within Rick's place, there was not going to be any violence at all. It simply was not allowed. Well, it's kind of the same thing at nightlife. My vampire simply will not allow it. And let's just say that the penalty for violating that rule can be dire. Okay,
Be
the
monstrous.
yeah, they're pretty severe. You're not going to do it twice. Let me put it to you that way. But yeah, so I'm going to do something with that a little bit later on. Like I say, I've got once I finish this werewolf trilogy, I've got two other books that I already know I'm going to write. One, I'm going to tackle my approach to Bigfoot, the
Oh,
Sasquatch,
okay. That'll be
and
interesting.
yeah, and I've pretty much I'm already working on the research and the background for it. And the other thing is I'm going to start taking all those screenplays that I couldn't sell. And I mean, I had agents and I had managers and I had all these people trying to help out. So somebody somewhere thought I was good and that they could make some money off of me. Um, but I'm going to take, like all screenwriters, I have a few that got made. I have scads that did not get made, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those screenplays and I'm going to treat them as detailed outlines, and I'm going to adapt them to novels and flesh them out to around 110 112,000 words. And you know what, I've got enough screenplays, I'll be writing for the next 20 years. you know so I'm going to be doing this the rest of my life. The only thing that's going to make me quit is if I go blind or I die. you know that's going to be it.
Well, I'm glad that we can look forward to more Mark Allen works, whether it be movies, novels, anything.
Well, novels. The only way there's going to be another Mark Allen movie, um, I do consider myself retired from the film industry. Um, about the only way I see that happening is if someone in the film industry wants to buy the film and television rights to uh, a novel or one of my series of novels, or that type of thing. I think that's about the only way we're going to see a new Mark Allen movie, is that way.
Well, you never know. You got plenty of life left, so
I sure hope so. I can't die yet. I have too many books to write.
So, Mark, last words for this episode of Let's Talk Tarot with Friends. Where can we find Alpha Male? Um, where can we find all of your works?
Uh, I publish exclusive. I publish independently, and I publish exclusively through Amazon. All of my work is available in paperback, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited. And I have found a voiceover artist, and I'm going to be expanding all of my books into audiobooks as well. I'll be publishing those through Amazon's Audible program. The first one up, the one that's being recorded now, Alpha Male.
Yay!
And once I get the other four available in audiobook, then moving forward, the plan is to offer every title I put out in paperback, Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, and audiobook.
I'm glad that you're doing audiobooks because I didn't like physically read the PDF. I had a PDF reader read it to me while I was on the treadmill. And
Uh,
every so often I would like glance over just to make sure because I just use a free one and sometimes the voice is not like occasionally it'll read a sentence very weird, especially when it goes from
uh,
one page to another. So I'm glad that you're doing these all with like a professional audio person. I would be
yeah,
very appreciative reading your next books with that.
yeah. He's a local guy up here. He's a stage actor, and he does voiceover work to supplement his income. It's like so many other artists. You got to hustle, 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 and you got to have a side hustle, and